how important it is to know yourself, do that reflective work, realize what your values are, and then move forward towards maybe an unconventional path with those values in mind.
Welcome to Women Talk Tech, the podcast for business professionals committed to advancing women in the tech sector.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Women Talk Tech. I'm your host, Wiese, and today we're launching a new series, and I'm kind of excited about this series. It's called We're All in Tech, and we're going to be interviewing a lot of different people who use tech in different ways, but aren't necessarily part of the quote-unquote tech sector. And we're going to explore how technology is impacting careers beyond the traditionally understood tech sector. I think everybody has to have some kind of tech game these days if they want their business to be successful. And today I'm excited because I have Annalisa Martin on the show, and she is with an organization called Parlay Ideas, and she's the COO at Parlay Ideas. And her goal is to foster more inclusive and student-driven discussions in classrooms around the world. And she started her career as a teacher in China and Canada, and then joined the Parlay team 5 years ago, where she could work towards making a greater impact at the intersection of education and technology. So I can't imagine a better first guest for the show. Welcome to the show, Annalisa.
Thanks for having me.
So I always ask people, give me your backstory when you were maybe in high school, maybe even public school. What were you doing? What were you thinking? Were you thinking you wanted to have a career in tech?
Definitely not. I think I don't even know. I wouldn't have known what that even meant at that time, and maybe I still don't know in full. But back in high school, I was super open, super interested in a lot of things. And I didn't really have a straight path that I wanted. I found that really daunting. And so what did I actually end up gravitating towards is kind of going into a, post-secondary degree where I could still explore as many things as possible. And I didn't have to kind of pigeonhole myself into one specific degree or one specific path. And as it turns out, that ended up being going into teaching. I was like, I feel like I could be good at this. I still get to explore all these different concepts and ideas and subject areas, and feel like, yeah, I'd be good at it. So maybe I'll just do that for now. And I could always kind of switch paths later on if I thought that was helpful or if I thought that was the way to be. I never really considered business in high school. I don't know why. I just thought of business as being like Excel spreadsheets and like, that was my like exposure to it. And I never really considered it. And obviously over time, I came to realize that business is actually a really great way that you can explore a lot of different concepts, ideas, problem solve, figure out solutions, and build really fun things. And so that took me a while to get there. I started off by teaching. I went and traveled in Asia and taught at international schools abroad. And then I came back home and was kind of thinking, how do I make a pivot into potentially business? What could I do? I considered getting an MBA and all of that. And then at some point, I started to notice, all these new apps that we're using in class. And I'm realizing, okay, this is like a super exciting, progressive field. And, maybe there are some roles or maybe there are some ways that I can leverage my skills from being in a classroom and actually, bring that to a small business and be able to work from the ground up and being able to, problem solve from there. And so that's where I started looking into ed tech.
So the company you're currently with, Parlay Ideas, it's an AI-powered instructional platform that makes it easy for teachers to foster meaningful, measurable, and inclusive class discussions. So tell me how this works.
Yeah. So our main goal, like you just said, is to encourage teachers to run more classroom discussions. Now, we believe in those discussions for a lot of different reasons. They've been around for thousands of years. We use them in all areas of our life, dinner table, boardroom, democratic process, all of that. And so there's also really great research that they're actually one of the best ways that people learn and kids learn. And so why are we not using that strategy more in classrooms? And how could we make it easier for teachers to actually facilitate student-driven discussion so that students really get the opportunities to develop those skills young in their educational career before they get to university, middle school, high school? How do we teach them the skills to build on each other's ideas and challenge each other respectfully and ask questions and be curious and really drive the learning themselves? Because obviously that's what we want to do, is create lifelong learners, and discussions are a great way to do that. And so Parlay, we basically have built this platform, most recently using AI as well, and using kind of OpenAI's ChatGPT technology within our tool to make that really easy. But what that looks like is we basically have two main activities. So we have a written discussion where students can anonymously kind of engage with ideas in their classes and practice their reading skills, writing skills, commenting on each other's ideas, and that's a written activity. And then we also have a verbal activity, and so that's more like your traditional Socratic seminar, where students are verbally sharing their ideas out loud, and they are building on each other's ideas in real time. That could happen in a in-class environment, or it could also happen in an online environment as well. And so, yeah.
So tell me, I'm dying to find out, where does AI play into this? How does AI play into this whole conversation? And what the heck's going on with AI in education right now?
Yeah, I think it's really, it's shaken the world, but particularly in education, it's kind of shaken up the way that teachers assign assignments and send out homework, because it's, students can really simply access it. And so that, I think a lot of attention has been drawn in the education sector in that context. But what we're moving towards, it seems like, is how can we actually simplify the administrative work that teachers have to do and really get them to a point where they're spending more time with students, building relationships with students, and, maybe taking a lot of really great insights and data that AI is providing to the teacher and making their job easier, making it easier for them to use their human skills and really focus on those probably the reasons that they went into teaching in the first place. And so within the context of Parlay, we're using AI in three ways to kind of simplify the process for teachers. So one is actually coming up with the lesson plan or coming up with the questions that they're posing to the class. You could type in, any topic that you want to have a discussion about, and Parlay is going to come up with those questions to prompt that dialogue amongst students.
Okay.
Teachers obviously can always change that. So that's the first way. Second way is helping with assessing discussions and just analyzing all of the participation data that we gather on Parlay, and then giving the teacher some insights of what feedback you can give the student. How might you assess that on a rubric or a tally for specific skills? And then, of course, the teacher looks at that, makes slight adaptations based on what they know about that student, and then giving it back. And then the final way that we're really excited about is actually extending conversations. So let's say we had a conversation here today. We're using AI to analyze the conversation and then come up with guiding questions to push for deeper understanding in that topic. So let's say we're having a discussion about, the causes of World War II, and students all share their ideas, and then we're actually going to have what we call the Parlay Genie, analyze that conversation and push for deeper understanding based on where the students are currently at. So just helping the teacher with each of those kind of time-consuming tasks in a discussion and making it easier for them.
Did you ever envision yourself in this kind of a role? Did you ever think this is where teaching would take you?
I definitely did not envision this at all. I think that's what's so exciting about it, is you end up in this spot and you look around and you're like, oh, I could have never imagined this, but it's awesome. It's amazing. And it makes you kind of raise the bar on your own expectations of, where you're going to be in 5-10 years. You could have some fuzzy vision of it, but ultimately it might actually be way better than what you thought.
I want to go back to something you said earlier when you used the word pivot, and you were saying that you had really tried to figure out what you wanted to do in business. That was obviously a big risk. And it was probably risky. And like, here's this career being a teacher that is somewhat stable, regular paycheck, summers off, all those things that people talk about with teaching. And you embraced uncertainty when it came to pursuing a more unconventional path. So tell us how you approach that risk. Can you share some insights with listeners about how you approach that risk and deciding to transition into this?
I think I kind of always had the mindset that it might not be best for me to stay in actually a stable job where I, knew exactly where I would be in 20 years. I kind of sensed that I would get bored by that, to be honest. And so I always had that in the back of my head. But of course, there's the social pressures that, why would you ever walk away from something like that? This is you got the perfect gig, and this could be, like you said, really stable. But I think deep down, I kind of had this sense that was not going to be satisfying for me. I really loved working in a school. It was very busy. I love being in, busy and sometimes chaotic environments. And I really loved that. And I loved working with kids. And I loved, I did really love teaching. But where it kind of felt short for me and where I felt like I could apply my skills in a bigger context were specifically around solving more intellectual problems. I was working in middle school, but I really wanted to be thinking about things bigger than what was at that level. I felt like I was a lot more of a strategic thinker, and I'm thinking about these problems that are happening in the world at a much more maybe abstract level. And I kind of wanted to dip my toes in, okay, how could I actually maybe get at those or be involved in solving those problems? Because I'm really passionate about them. And then also too, I wanted to be around people who had diverse life experiences. And, the staff rooms are awesome, but sometimes you have a lot of similar perspectives. And I wanted to see, I was around teachers all the time growing up, a lot of people in my family. And so I was just really curious about what existed outside of the school environment. And I wanted to dive into that before I made a decision on, staying in a career that was going to be a lot of a similar environment for my whole, for a long time.
You mentioned in your notes when you submitted them that mentorship was a big part of your, greatly impacted your career path. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Talk a little bit about mentorship and the role that it plays?
Yeah. So I think initially when I was making that jump to, consider working at a ed tech startup, my younger brother of all people was the one that encouraged me to kind of just like reach out and, cold call somebody and just let people know that you're willing to help and just let people know that maybe you're even willing to help for free. And I just needed that push, I think, a little bit to just see what happens. And that actually happened with Parlay when I eventually joined the team. Is I just ended up cold calling my now colleague Bobby and asked, can we just meet for coffee and talk about some of the things that you're working on? And that exactly worked out how I intended it to. But then as kind of in the past 5 years growing with Parlay, I have found that it could be a bit of a lonely process working and building a business and that sort of thing. And I really have had to leverage other perspectives to kind of ground me and understand where, what I might be missing out on and where I'm maybe not getting feedback because I don't have a lot of people around to bounce ideas off of. And so I really leaned into podcasts, but I also actually sought out a life coach to help as well. Somebody who kind of had an experience as both a social worker and an executive kind of coach as well. And she was able to give me some really good feedback and kind of I was able to hear from her experience working with so many different women and professionals and navigating these complexities of business decisions and building things from the ground up.
Hi, listeners. We are so excited to invite you all to join us on Thursday, September 14th at the in-person Women in IT USA event in New York, where Diversity Q and Information Age will bring together the Women in IT Summit during the day and the awards gala dinner that same evening. Join us for a day filled with valuable insights, thought-provoking conversations, and an evening of networking, delicious cuisine, and pure enjoyment. It's guaranteed to be a fabulous time. To find out more about the summit and awards ceremony and to book your tickets to attend, please visit womeniniTawards.com.
I think that's great. And I think that's great advice for people. I think there's 2 points that are really good takeaways there for our listeners. The first is, don't be afraid to cold call someone. Don't be afraid to be really polite and say, look, I'm trying to do this. Is there any chance you'd take a few minutes and talk to me, whether it's a Zoom call, a coffee, whatever. When I feel people are approaching me in a respectful way and have a very clear goal that they're setting for themselves, I always take time to say yes to those people, and I think that's a good thing, so I think that's a great takeaway. I think the second thing that you said that's really important is you're not afraid to say, I don't know all the answers. I don't know necessarily all the paths that this is going to take. The fact that you are working with a life coach and the fact that you are open to that is fantastic, because I don't think enough people do that. I don't think they say, maybe I need another set of opinions here. Maybe I need to look at this differently. So who can help me with this? So I think mentorship is really interesting. Mm-hmm. Recently in our ambition report, we recognized or noticed that the women who responded to the ambition report were more apt to want to follow the path of the trailblazer than to follow the path of the apprentice or that mentorship role that men have traditionally carved out for themselves. It almost sounds like you're the trailblazer. Here you are taking a teaching certificate or teaching degree, and you're turning it into something where you can, blaze a brand new trail with what's going on. So, how does that resonate with you? The path of the trailblazer versus the path of the of the apprentice. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of excitement going into areas that are unknown. And I think that's sometimes where you learn the most, and it's where the most interesting experiences come out of. And I think that, you kind of have to be thinking about, go where the puck is going, to use a hockey reference. Yeah. You have to think, how can I be there, and how can I leverage my unique skills and learn something new outside of a path that's already been carved.
You've shared.
I do have a bit of a contrarian bend. I will admit to that, and so I think there's a lot of maybe organic excitement that comes from doing the opposite, or kind of exploring the other perspective.
Right. I love that.
It's exciting, that's for sure.
All right. So we always love to hear, you've shared some great advice already, but do you have advice for young women looking to forge an unconventional career path in the tech sector? What advice would you give people?
I think this has become clear to me over time, is how important it is to know yourself, do that reflective work, realize what your values are, and then kind of move forward towards maybe an unconventional path with those values in mind, because only then will you be able to, bring your unique skill set to the world and be able to provide the most value to a company, or even just building out the life that you want. And I think sometimes we can be led astray by societal, or by fake ambition, or by societal kind of concepts of ambition. And ultimately, I think that ambitiousness should be defined by yourself. And that's how you could stay true to who you want to be in the life that you want to live, career-wise, but also in your relationships and in your the rest of your life as well.
That's a fantastic segue to the point that I need to close with, which is we've recently published the Ambition Report after doing research, and it's available on our website, womentalktech.co, not .com. And we encourage our listeners to go and take a look at the report, download it, see what the highlights were of the report. We think this is just the beginning. We're just scratching the surface here on the topic of ambition. And I think your point is really well taken, Annalisa, about, it needs to be something very personal to you. And we have to get away from societal norms or whatever we think that it is. And in fact, the whole reason we did the ambitious survey and we wanted to talk about this topic is because we want to change the narrative. We think the narrative's broken. And the narrative is, women don't put themselves forward for jobs unless they have 100% of the qualifications, where men will do it at 60%. We heard that over and over and over again from podcast guests. And the ambition report just said otherwise. Women are not less ambitious than men. And there's a new definition of what ambition means, because it doesn't just factor in career, money, wealth. It factors in all these other facets of our life. And to your point, understanding what your values are, to understanding what is something that you just can't abide by, and something that you can as you're forging this path. So we're really excited because this is just the beginning of the conversation about ambition, and we want to keep going and digging deeper and deeper and deeper. So I'm really glad to hear that you seem to be really on side with this idea, and it's great to hear a podcast guest say that. But I just want to thank you so much. You are the inaugural episode of We're All in Tech, and I can't think of a better example of someone who has taken something that, they thought they wanted to do and parlayed it, no pun intended, into something else. And I just think it's fantastic. So thanks so much for being on the show today, Annalisa.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you're doing. I think that it's really exciting to be a part of this sort of thing. I think that ambitious people like to be around other ambitious people time and time again. And so it's really inspiring that you're putting a focus on this. You're leading the charge, and I'm more than certain that it's going to resonate with others.
Well, thank you so much. I've been speaking today with Annalisa Martin, who is the COO at Parlay Ideas. And Parlay is an AI-powered instructional platform that makes it easy for teachers to foster meaningful, measurable, and inclusive class discussions. Very interesting days we're in now. And so thank you for the work you're doing, and so interesting how you've transitioned. And I think a great example, and you've provided some great advice. So thank you so much for being on the show. You've been listening to another episode of Women Talk Tech. I'm your host, Marie Wiese, and as always, thank you so much for listening.